I always believed weddings were sacred, until my sister slapped me in front of 200 guests in her white gown with our parents nodding in approval. I had flown across the country just to be humiliated by the very people who should have protected me. But what none of them expected was the groom taking the microphone. His voice calm, his words deadly, secrets buried for years unravelled within minutes. That night, I lost a family, but found my voice. And if you think this is about jealousy or attention, you're dead wrong. This is about betrayal, justice, and a truth no one saw coming. I hadn't seen my family in 5 years. But when I stepped off the plane and saw my mother waiting at the gate with open arms, it almost felt like nothing had changed. She smelled of cinnamon and hairspray, the scent that used to cling to my childhood sweaters. "Chloe, baby, you look so skinny," she said, pulling me into a stiff hug that lasted 2 seconds too long, her words more observation than concern. The house hadn't changed either. Same beige curtains, same floral wallpaper, same row of porcelain angels lined above the mantel. It was like stepping into a photo album someone forgot to close. On the kitchen counter sat a tray of lemon tarts, my favourite, or at least they used to be. "I made these for you," Mum said. But when I reached for one, Jessica's voice rang out from the hallway. "Be careful, Chloe, don't ruin your dress. You just got here." She descended the stairs like a queen, her smile wide, her arms open. She pulled me into a hug that was all bones and air. "You look great, very New York," she said, her tone dipping just enough on New York to make it sound like an insult. She was glowing, bride-to-be glow, but underneath I sensed something else. When she looked at me, her eyes held a flicker of something sharp. It passed so quickly, I almost missed it. Dinner was a blur of wine, roasted chicken, and stories from people I barely remembered. Jessica sat at the head of the table with her fiancé, Matthew, who was polite and observant, nodding at all the right moments. I sat next to Aunt Lila, who leaned in and whispered, "You always were the pretty one, you know. Jessica just talks louder." I laughed, but inside I flinched. After dessert, everyone gathered in the living room for Jessica and Matthew's engagement speech. There were candles, a slideshow of photos, Jessica as a baby, Jessica at prom, Jessica at graduation. I waited for one, just one photo of us together. None came. When Jessica stood to speak, she thanked everyone. And of course, my incredible parents, who have supported me unconditionally, she said, her eyes wet with performative gratitude. She paused, looked around the room, and to everyone who's always believed in me, thank you for never making me feel second. There was a beat. A beat where everyone clapped. A beat where I realised what she had just done. No mention of me, not a single syllable. When the applause died down, she came over and whispered, "Let's not make this weekend about you, Chloe. Don't steal the spotlight." Again. Again. The word hung in the air between us like a loaded gun. I smiled through gritted teeth and excused myself to the kitchen. I stared at the lemon tarts and thought about the last time I was in this house. After Dad's heart surgery, when I had flown in to help while Jessica was too busy, back then she had told me I was being dramatic for insisting Mom needed support. "They're fine. You just want to play the hero." As I stood there, Mum walked in, holding a garment bag. Don't wear white to the wedding, she said without preamble. It's Jessica's day. You don't want to start something. I brought cream, I replied, surprised by how defensive I sounded. Even cream can look white in photos. Just be mindful, okay? It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order wrapped in concern. I nodded, of course, I'll wear something else. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. The house was silent, save for the creaks and groans of old wood and older ghosts. I thought about the slideshow, the photos, the speech, and then I thought about Jessica's eyes, that quick flash when I walked through the door. It wasn't just a wedding, it was a stage. And I wasn't invited to play the part I used to. The next morning, brunch was served in the backyard beneath strings of fairy lights and pastel balloons. Tables were arranged in a charming semicircle with place cards neatly aligned beside champagne flutes. I wandered over to find mine and froze. My name sat squarely in the middle of the kids' table, a collection of teenage cousins who barely remembered me, one of them actively scrolling through TikTok while chewing gum like a cow. I glanced around, trying to spot a mistake. Maybe it was a joke? But there was no laugh, no gotcha from anyone. Jessica caught my eye from across the yard and offered a tight smile. Not sorry. Not surprised, just satisfied. I sat down slowly, folding my hands in my lap, ignoring the awkward glances from the kids who didn't know what to say. Mum floated past at one point, checking flower arrangements, and I asked, "Was there a reason I'm sitting here?" She paused, as if the question confused her. "Oh, that's where your card was." "It's just easier that way, Chloe. You're not part of the bridal party, and we wanted to keep the tables balanced." Balanced, right. Later that day, the photographer called for immediate family to gather for a quick candid set. I rose, automatically assuming I'd be in the shot. I was the bride's only sibling. But as I stepped toward the group, Jessica turned and said, "Oh, actually, can you let us get a few with just the core family?" I blinked. "I'm not core family," Mum chimed in, flustered. "Sweetie, it's just about symmetry in the shot. You're wearing that green dress. It'll throw the balance off. We'll get one with you later. Promise." I stepped back. I nodded, but something cracked. The air felt thick as I sat alone on the porch swing, watching them pose. Laughter rang out like bells, but it clanged in my ears. I looked at Dad, who didn't meet my eyes, just shifted his stance and adjusted his tie. That evening, during the rehearsal dinner, guests took turns giving speeches, sweet, awkward, nostalgic. Jessica stood up, flushed with wine and attention. Okay, my turn," she giggled, holding a folded paper in her hand. "I found something from our childhood," she said, looking straight at me. "Chloe wrote this when she was 16. It's deep." I sat up straight. I hadn't seen that journal in years. She began reading. The words echoed, familiar, raw, private. I had written them during the lowest point of high school, when I felt invisible, when I thought disappearing might hurt less than trying to belong. Lines about drowning in silence, about never being enough. They weren't poetry. They were confessions. And now they were entertainment. Laughter rippled across the tables, uncomfortable, unsure. Jessica smiled wider. She was always the dramatic one. I stood. My chair scraped the floor. For a moment, the entire tent went silent. I walked out. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked slowly, methodically, to the edge of the garden, past the fence, down the gravel road, because if I didn't, I might scream. At the end of the road was a small bench where Dad used to sit during his Sunday reading sessions. I collapsed onto it, the air sharp in my lungs. My hands were shaking, but my mind was alarmingly still. That poem had been buried in a shoebox in my old closet, the one Mom promised not to touch. I closed my eyes, and the past flooded in, 17 years old. I had received a scholarship to study in Boston, a dream. I remembered the call, the disbelief, the joy. Then the silence at the dinner table. Jessica hadn't made the shortlist. Mum said nothing. Then later, in the kitchen, she told me Jessica needed the structure more, that Boston was too far, too intense for a sensitive soul like you. I had tried to argue. She had stared through me. Chloe, it's just not your time. I declined the offer. And now, with that journal in Jessica's hand, I understood. Mum must have told the school I wasn't interested. She stole the opportunity from me before I ever had the chance to say yes. Back in the present, I realized my scalp was itching badly. I ran my fingers through my hair and watched strands fall like feathers into my lap. My stomach twisted, not from hunger, but from weeks, maybe months, of knots I hadn't acknowledged. Sleep had become fractured ever since I arrived. My nights were filled with dreams of drowning, of being pushed underwater by familiar hands, while voices told me to smile. And still, somehow, I had convinced myself that this weekend would be healing. Now I knew better. I wasn't a guest at my sister's wedding. I was the sacrifice. The ceremony shimmered under fairy lights strung between oaks, and from a distance it could have been a scene from a bridal magazine. Guests laughed, glasses clinked, and Jessica floated through the crowd like a goddess draped in lace. I stood at the fringe, sipping warm champagne and trying to exist without being noticed. Just before the vows, Jessica took the microphone. "I want to do something special," she said, beaming. "Something personal." The audience hushed with interest. She turned toward me. "Chloe, come up here." My heart stopped. The last time she called my name in public like that, we were kids, and I ended up crying in front of the entire school. But this wasn't middle school. This was her wedding. I walked up, wary, confused. She took my hand, held it tightly, and smiled wide for the crowd. "We've had our ups and downs," she said, facing the audience now. "But I want to give Chloe something she gave me years ago without even realizing it." A screen behind us flickered to life. It was me, 16, in my bedroom, crying. The video was shaky, the lighting dim, but it was unmistakably me, sobbing, whispering into a camera, words not meant for anyone else. I don't know who I am. I think I might be broken. My breath caught. The video paused. Jessica grinned. Chloe's always been dramatic, but that's what made her so unforgettable. Laughter, polite, confused, cruel. She pressed play again, but something had changed. The audio was altered. My words chopped, rearranged. I made it all up. I lied. I ruined her life. My knees wobbled. The screen went black. Jessica turned, dropped the mic, and slapped me across the face. The sound echoed across the garden like a gunshot. Gasps. Some hands flew to mouths, a few awkward chuckles, then clapping, applause. And then Mom, nodding, Dad, not blinking. Jessica leaned in, whispering close enough for me to feel her breath. "This is what you deserve. For Boston, for Matthew, for always thinking you were better." I stumbled back, my face stinging, my chest hollow. My heel caught on the edge of the platform, and I nearly fell. No one moved to help. I turned and walked off the stage. The tent felt smaller as I pushed through it, the air heavier. I couldn't breathe. Inside the house, I bolted the guest bathroom door and collapsed to the floor. I didn't cry. I screamed so hard my throat tore. I clawed at the bathroom rug, at my own arms, anything to stop the echo of that video. Then I remembered her voice again. Mom in the kitchen, 15 years ago. You were a mistake from the beginning. I'd asked her why she never hugged me like she did Jessica. She was slicing apples, didn't even look up. The words landed like bricks then, and they did now. I crawled to the sink and looked at myself. Mascara streaked, lip bleeding from biting too hard. My reflection looked like a stranger. A girl trying to survive a war no one else saw. I threw up. When I finally peeled myself from the floor, I made it to the guest room, locked the door, and pulled my laptop from my bag. I hadn't opened my old email in years. I typed the password. It worked. Scrolling through the clutter, I saw it. An unread message from nearly a decade ago. From Aunt Mary. Subject line urgent about Jessica. I opened it. Chloe, I'm writing this because I'm terrified. Jessica told me something disturbing today. She said she's been lying about you for years, twisting things. I confronted her, and she laughed. I think she's hurting you on purpose. Please tell your mother, don't let this go on. Below it, forwarded to Mom's address. No response, no follow-up, just silence. And in that silence, the truth bloomed. My mother knew. She always knew. The nausea returned. So did the memory I buried, deeper than all the rest. 18 years old, Jessica crying. Matthew, her then boyfriend, sneaking into my room at night. The night I screamed. The next morning, Mum pulled me aside, told me not to exaggerate. Said boys got confused sometimes, that it was better to let it go than ruin a future. Jessica didn't speak to me for a month. When she did, it was to say, if you tell anyone, I'll ruin you. And now, on her wedding day, she'd done exactly that. I curled into myself on the bed, knees to chest, nails digging into my skin. And somewhere between the silence and the shaking, I realised I wasn't just betrayed, I had been erased. The next morning, the sun cut through the blinds like razors, slicing light across the hotel bedsheets. I sat upright, breathless, eyes burning, but there were no tears. Not today. I walked to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. My cheek was still swollen, red where Jessica's hand had landed. But it wasn't the mark that held my attention. It was my eyes. They weren't hollow anymore. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like someone who had nothing left to lose. I grabbed a pen and a notepad from the nightstand and began to write. Not poetry, not memories, just a list. A list of everything they'd taken from me. Boston, my dignity, my body, my name, my narrative, my right to be angry. Every lie they'd buried under fake smiles and flower arrangements, I wrote them down like receipts. My hand trembled, but my heart stayed steady. Halfway through the third page, my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. It was short. I'm sorry. I didn't know. M. Matthew. I stared at it for a long time before typing back. What didn't you know? His reply came quickly. That the video was edited, that she stole it from your things, that you didn't do the things she said back then. I thought you tried to break us up. A third message arrived moments later. She told me you came on to me, that you faked what happened. I believed her. I'm so sorry. I stared at those words, and something in me shifted, not softened, not forgiven, just realigned. He wasn't innocent, but he was a pawn, just like I had been. And now he was seeing the board for what it really was. I let the silence stretch for a full hour before I responded. I want to talk privately, he agreed. We met that afternoon in a quiet cafe, 2 towns over. I wore sunglasses and a scarf, partly to hide the bruising, partly because I didn't want anyone to see me becoming someone new. He looked pale, thinner than I remembered. When he saw me, he stood. "I don't know where to start," he said. "Then don't," I replied, sitting across from him. "Just listen." I opened my bag and pulled out a manila folder. Inside, printed screenshots, forwarded emails, copies of journal entries, text messages Jessica had sent over the years. Some threatening, some manipulative, all damning. Matthew leafed through them, each page shaving a layer of denial from his face. "She told me you were unstable," he muttered. She needed someone to validate her narrative. "Are you a convenient?" I said. He looked up. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because," I said steady, "you're the only one who can undo it, publicly." He leaned back. "You want me to cancel the wedding." "I want you to tell the truth." A pause. Then he asked, "Will you help me?" That was the moment, the hinge. I looked at him, not as a man who once hurt me, but as the lever to break the cycle. "Yes," I said, "but we do it my way." We spent the next few hours planning. I gave him everything. Dates, incidents, names. I even had a recorded voicemail from Jessica 2 years ago, threatening to expose an ex-co-worker of mine if I didn't skip Thanksgiving. "I'll give the speech right after the vows," he said. "Let the illusion peak. Then crack it." "No," I said. "You wait. Wait until the end. Let them think they've won. And then you speak." He swallowed. "And what about you?" "I'll be there," I replied, "but not as a guest." He raised an eyebrow. "I'll be the witness." We stood to leave. He reached out, hesitated, then said, "Thank you." I didn't smile. I nodded. Outside, the wind was sharper than I expected. It caught my scarf, pulling it loose. I let it fall. I didn't need to hide anymore. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. One last text. "I'll need the mic at the end. Will you help me?" I typed back 2 words. "Let them hear." The church was a cathedral of curated perfection, every petal aligned, every guest in pastel, every smile fixed like porcelain. Jessica stood at the altar, resplendent in a gown of intricate lace and layered deception. She looked like royalty. No, she looked like she believed she was. I entered quietly, slipping into the back row. No one noticed. I wore black. No one expected grief at a wedding, but that's exactly what this was, the burial of truth beneath layers of ceremony. Matthew stood beside her, eyes forward, jaw tight. His hands trembled slightly. Only I saw it. The music swelled. Vows were exchanged, rehearsed to mechanical precision. Jessica's voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with false sincerity. Matthew's replies were hollow, his gaze never quite meeting hers. The officiant raised his hand to pronounce them husband and wife, and that's when Matthew stepped forward. "Before we go any further," he said, voice amplified, steady, "I need to say something." A ripple passed through the guests, shoulders shifting, eyes widening, whispers stirring. Jessica tilted her head, confused. "Matthew?" she asked, her voice trembling for the first time. He turned to the crowd, not to her. "There's someone else I loved first, someone who never got to be seen for who she truly is, someone this entire wedding has tried to erase. You could hear the air leave the room. He looked toward the back, toward me. "Chloe," he said. Gasps erupted like bubbles in boiling water, a collective intake of breath that no one quite exhaled. Jessica's face went pale, her grip on the bouquet tightening until her knuckles turned white. Matthew continued. "Years ago, I cared for Chloe. I was young, confused, and easily manipulated. I believed lies, cruel ones. I turned my back on someone who deserved truth and protection. I let someone tell my story for me, and worse, I helped her rewrite Chloe's. Today, that ends." Silence, dense, pressing. "I was told Chloe tried to ruin our relationship, that she was jealous, that she made things up, but I've seen the proof, the messages, the letters, the recordings. I know now that I was part of a lie." He turned to Jessica, eyes clear now. "You used me, you used her, and now you want to seal it all with vows?" Jessica tried to speak, but no sound came. Her mouth opened and closed, her face contorting into something wild and unfamiliar. Matthew turned back to the officiant. "I can't do this." He stepped down from the altar. Jessica chased after him. "You're doing this because of her, after everything we planned?" "No," he said without turning around. "I'm doing this because of what you did." He walked past me without a word, but I felt the shift in the air around him, like a spell breaking. Jessica stood frozen at the altar, abandoned in front of a sea of guests who no longer knew where to look. Then, from the left side of the room, a voice spoke up. "I believe Chloe too." Heads turned. A woman in her 50s stood up, Aunt Rachel, the cousin who had once nearly lost her business after Jessica spread a rumour about her stealing from the family fund. She had vanished from family events for years. I was told to stay quiet, that Jessica was just emotional, that we should all protect the family image, but it wasn't protection. It was enabling. Jessica's mouth dropped. "You don't know anything," she hissed. "I know enough," Rachel said calmly, "and I know the difference between a victim and a master manipulator." The crowd shifted. Whispers rose. Someone stood and left. Another followed. Jessica turned to her parents, seeking something, comfort, defense, rescue, but Mom looked away. Dad simply walked out. Jessica's voice cracked as she shouted, "You're all just jealous!" But no one was listening anymore. The photographer quietly began packing his equipment. The cake server disappeared. A bridesmaid removed her heels and left barefoot. The entire event unravelled like a ribbon caught in wind. Jessica stood alone. I rose from my seat, walked slowly toward the aisle. Each step felt like lifting a weight off my chest. I didn't stop at the altar. I didn't look at her. I walked right past her toward the open church doors. No applause, no triumphant music, just quiet and freedom. Outside, the sky had shifted, clouds broken, light piercing through. A breeze lifted my hair. For the first time in years, my feet felt steady on the ground. My name had been dragged, erased, rewritten. But now it belonged to me again, and every step I took from that place wasn't an escape, it was a reclamation. The headlines disappeared as quickly as they came. Runaway groom exposes bride at altar. Wedding implodes after shocking confession. But unlike the media buzz, the real aftermath settled slowly, like dust after a demolition. Jessica vanished from social media within a week. Her Instagram wiped clean, her LinkedIn deleted, even her Pinterest boards gone. Friends who once flooded her comment section with hearts and hashtags now quietly removed her from group chats. Her name became a whispered cautionary tale. Even in silence, she managed to control the narrative until she couldn't. The family text thread went quiet, then exploded. Accusations, denials, screenshots. People took sides, then backtracked. Old stories resurfaced. Stories I hadn't even known, of lies, of manipulation, of silent destruction carried out over years. I wasn't the only one. I had just been the most visible casualty. Mum didn't call, neither did Jessica, but Dad did. It was an email. Subject: I was wrong. I opened it cautiously, half expecting deflection or worse, justification, but it was simple. I believed what was easiest to believe. I let your mother's silence speak for us both. I failed you, Chloe, and I'm sorry. No excuses, just words I had needed for a lifetime, and somehow they still weren't enough. I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Weeks passed. The wedding venue cancelled their contract. Jessica's former colleagues began quietly circulating stories about stolen credit, ruined opportunities, broken friendships. At home, the portrait that used to hang above the mantel, Jessica and me, in matching dresses, holding hands stiffly under our mother's watchful eye, was taken down. No announcement, just gone. Dad told Aunt Rachel it fell. No one believed him. And for the first time, people started asking questions they should have asked years ago. Was she always like that? Why didn't we see it sooner? Why didn't you say something, Chloe? I didn't answer them because the truth was they did see it. They just chose not to look. And now they were forced to. I packed my life into a few boxes and left the city. Drove for hours until the ocean appeared like a promise on the horizon. I found a small cottage near the coast, nothing extravagant, but it had a porch and a view and silence that didn't hurt. Each morning I woke to the sound of waves. Each night I fell asleep without fear. I started writing, not about them, but about me, my healing, my grief, my rebirth. The pages filled slowly at first, then faster, like the tide finding rhythm. One day I posted a short essay online. What happens when your abuser shares your last name? The response was immediate. Hundreds of messages, stories, confessions. Survivors who had never spoken out because no one would believe them. People who were still stuck at the family table, smiling through betrayal. So I started something. A group, not therapy, not confessionals, a space. For daughters who were scapegoats, for sons who were invisible, for anyone told to stay silent for the sake of appearances. We met virtually at first, then in person. We wrote letters we'd never send, held space for anger without shame, rewrote our narratives without permission. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One afternoon, sitting on the porch, I watched a woman about my age step out of a taxi. Eyes heavy but determined. She had flown in for one of our weekend retreats. We'd never met in person, but I knew her story. She walked up the stairs, dropped her bag and said, "I didn't think I'd actually come." I smiled. "But you did." That night, we sat in a circle beneath string lights and stars, the ocean whispering secrets behind us. She shared her story. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. Afterwards, she looked at me and asked, "How did you survive?" I didn't speak for a moment. Then I said, "I stopped trying to be loved by people who only loved the version of me they could control. I let myself be angry, I let myself grieve, and then I let myself begin again." There was silence. Then someone whispered, "I want that." I looked around at the circle, faces raw, eyes wet, hands held. You can have it, I said. We all can. It starts here. I turned slightly, looking into the darkness beyond the light, and for a moment I wasn't just Chloe. I was every daughter who had been silenced, every sibling cast aside, every truth denied. But now I was also the voice that wouldn't shut up, the hand reaching back, the proof that survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And to you, yes, you reading this, if you've ever been hurt by the very people meant to protect you, know this: you are not alone. There is a way forward, and you are allowed to take it.